Chapter 382. Facing Yang Lu's savagery and brutality, Xian Xianghua did not surrender. She stood up slowly, and the demonic qi behind her condensed into a heavenly demon again. She looked around, and the corpses of the dead made her a little dazed. Back then, the war between the righteous and demonic factions was as tragic as this. Back then, she was fearless and mighty with her demonic might. She did not care about the pitiful people who died in the war. But now their positions were reversed. She became the weak one, and she could not fight against the arrogant Yang Lu at all. She felt a little sad in her heart. The human race had been fighting among themselves for so many years, but they were still going to be defeated by their enemies. No, there was still hope. She suddenly thought of Zhou Xuanji, and her eyes became determined. The heavenly demon behind her roared into the sky, which made the heavenly guard's mocking laughter even louder. This woman still wants to fight? The northern wilderness region is just SOSO. Let's just kill her. Can't we find a beauty? Ah, such a strong beauty is rare. I really don't know what she's thinking. She's overestimating herself. They ridiculed him wantonly, completely unaware of how cruel their actions were. Yang Lu raised his right arm and raised his axe again. He looked down at Xian Xianghua with disdain. Savandi Xian. Zhou Shaoxian struggled with all her might. She was so anxious that she cried. When she was young, although Xian Xianghua only visited her twice, she treated her well and even taught her cultivation. She had always admired Xian Xianghua, the most powerful woman in the world, the former top cultivator in the world. The others looked terrible. But what should they do? Jiang Shui took out her staff and took a deep breath. She was ready to fight. She knew that her cultivation was not high enough, but Zhou Xuanji owed Xian Xianghua too much. Not only that, Xian Xianghua even taught her the celestial devil rebirth technique. No matter if she was Zhou Xuanji's wife or herself, she could not just stand by and watch. What are you doing? Daoya old man stared at her and reprimanded. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Tsongjian, Han Shenhua, Lin Changge, Ning Zifeng, and the others stood up one after another. They could escape from this battle. But where could they run to? Rumble. At this moment, the crater began to shake violently. Everyone turned to look. Fate Emperor River was twisting violently, as though something was about to burst out. The pebbles and rocks in the huge pit were shaken into the air. It was a spectacular scene. Whoosh, a bolt of lightning struck down like a giant dragon, blasting a huge hole in the wall of the pit. Its destructive power was terrifying to the extreme. That is, founding Emperor Qi Wei, who was lying in the distance, became excited. His breathing quickened and his upper body trembled. Yang Lu frowned and had a bad premonition. He swung his axe at once. Although I have yet to become a great emperor, I have broken through. Do you know what stage I have broken through to? Yang Lu laughed condescendingly and deliberately mystified him. He did not ask the heavenly guards to attack but to kill Zhou Xuanji himself. After killing the top cultivator in the world, Spirit Sovereign Yen would surely be happy. When Ji Xian revives, he would surely reward him. If I cannot kill you within 3 moves, I will kill myself here. Zhou Xuanji looked up at Yang Lu and said slowly. His tone was casual, but his eyes were so sharp. With this, the heavenly guards laughed even louder. Is this guy crazy? A 6th tribulation scattered immortal killed an 8th tribulation scattered immortal in 3 moves? Yang Lu was laughing too, but his heart tightened suddenly because he noticed that the hundreds of thousands of Emperor Sword Court's disciples were still looking at Zhou Xuanji passionately, as though they were injected with chicken blood. Could it be that Zhou Xuanji had some tricks up his sleeves? Without a word, he charged toward Zhou Xuanji with his axes in both hands. His speed was extremely fast. It was so fast that everyone's eyes could not keep up with him, including the other 29 heavenly guards. But Zhou Xuanji was even faster. He raised his hand and swung his sword, but no one saw it. In their eyes, he did not even raise his hand. A stream of sword light flashed and disappeared in an instant. Yang Lu's pupils contracted and instinctively wanted to block with his axes. His head was separated from his body. His head spun rapidly in the air and blood spurted out from his neck. The scene froze. Everyone's mouth was agape. From their point of view, Zhou Xuanji did not attack, but Yang Lu's head flew off strangely. While they were horrified, they felt a chill down their spines. They had witnessed Yang Lu's prowess with their own eyes. Only 1 out of 10 million cultivators survived, which was enough to show how powerful he was. Zhou Xuanji came up to Yang Lu in one step and grabbed his shoulder. He activated world internalization to absorb his magic energy. Sorry, I overestimated you. 1 slash is enough. Zhou Xuanji stared at Yang Lu's head and laughed coldly. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 383. How is this possible? Yang Lu, who only had his head left, stared at Zhou Xuanji furiously. Fear was hidden deep in his eyes. He had sensed Zhou Xuanji's sword chi just now, but it was too fast. It was so fast that he couldn't dodge or block it. They were clearly two major realms apart. Why was this happening? He couldn't understand. He wanted to regain control of his body, but he found that he couldn't control it. He couldn't even leave his body even if he wanted to. This was because his soul was in his physical body, and there was only the will of his soul in his head. "What are you doing?" he screamed in horror. He finally felt the aura of death. Zhou Xuanji pressed down on his shoulder and laughed coldly. "I want to kill you. You can beg me now. Depending on your performance, I will decide your life and death." This was said by Yang Lu. Now that Zhou Xuanji returned it to him, it was undoubtedly humiliating him. The heavenly guards in the distance were drenched in cold sweat. They did not dare to act at all. They could not see how powerful Zhou Xuanji was, and they could only feel a chill down their spines. Yang Lu was so angry that he almost exploded, but he could clearly feel his vitality fading away. "I was wrong. Please spare my life," he gritted his teeth and said. After saying this, he couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. He had never been so humiliated before. If this matter were to spread to the upper realm, how would he survive? However, Zhou Xuanji did not stop and continued to absorb his magic energy. An eighth tribulation scattered immortal's magic energy was incredibly powerful, and it was enough for his cultivation to improve. Yang Lu was anxious. He could no longer care about his pride and face. "I beg you, spare my life. I beg you, just treat me as a dog, don't kill me. I'm willing to be your slave, please let me go this time. Ah, what do you want me to do for you to forgive me?" Yang Lu's face was full of fear and despair, screaming at the top of his lungs. Seeing him in such a miserable state, no one sympathized with him. Instead, they felt carefree. Those dead cultivators had also begged Yang Lu to let them live. This guy deserved to die. He should be in even more pain. Soon, Zhou Xuanji absorbed all of Yang Lu's magic energy and destroyed his soul. An eighth tribulation bodiless celestial was killed without any resistance. He turned to look at the other 29 heavenly guards. The heavenly guards were terrified and wanted to escape, but they didn't know how to report back. Spirit Sovereign Yen was more brutal than Yang Lu, and he never showed mercy to his subordinates. Zhou Xuanji took Yang Lu's storage ring and strolled toward the heavenly guards. "Father is mighty." Zhou Xiaoxian cried out excitedly. Just when she was in despair and indignation because of Xian Xianghua, her father appeared once again and killed his enemies with absolute power. Bai Hao Yisin and Feng Qiul stood in the forest, both of them silent. Cold sweat covered Feng Qiul's forehead. His eyes were wide open and blood veins covered his eyeballs. He could not understand what he had just seen. Has he already become a great emperor? He asked carefully. Other than becoming a great emperor, how else could Zhou Xuanji be so powerful? That was an eighth tribulation scattered immortal. That was a cultivation that even the most powerful human in history could not reach before they ascended. Bai Hao Yisin said faintly with a complicated look in his eyes. He did not become a great emperor, but he can be called a great emperor candidate. He must have comprehended another powerful energy. Facing Zhou Xuanji, he felt pressured. Once this brat becomes a great emperor, how powerful would he be? At Juedi Cliff, Spirit Sovereign Yen sat on a rock and stared ahead. A ball of demonic chi was surging at the edge of the cliff, which vaguely took the shape of a human. His expression changed suddenly and he frowned slightly. Yang Lu is dead. It shouldn't be. Could it be because of Fate Emperor River? He mumbled to himself. He was a little confused but did not panic. The difference in power between him and Yang Lu was huge. He could crush Yang Lu with one hand, or else how could the unruly Yang Lu submit to him? At this moment, the demonic chi dispersed. A silhouette landed on the edge of the cliff. It was Dugu. He should be called Devil Emperor Dugu. Devil Emperor Dugu stood tall and straight. Demonic chi wrapped around his body, covering his flesh. His face was pale and his white hair reached the ground. His eyes were blood-red with black pupils. He twisted his neck and sighed in amazement. It feels so good to be reborn. His eyes beamed with brilliance. 50,000 years ago, he dominated the world and was invincible. He became a great emperor and ascended. Because he died in the war in the upper realm, his soul was hidden in Juedi Cliff. After so many years, his ambition was almost extinguished. However, the first thing he did after his rebirth was to revive his ambition. A domineering aura exploded from his body, causing the rocks on the cliff to tremble violently. Spirit Sovereign Yen got up and clapped his hands as he laughed. The world-shaking demon emperor has finally been reborn. It's time for the immortal and mortal realms to feel your anger. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 384. Anger? Why would I be angry? Devil Emperor Dugu glanced at Spirit Sovereign Yen and asked indifferently. Seeing his attitude, Spirit Sovereign Yen was not angry. If you want to take revenge, I'm afraid you'll need to cultivate for a long time, but I have another way. Spirit Sovereign Yen chuckled. Devil Emperor Dugu quickly arrived in front of him, leaving behind a series of afterimages. The two of them were less than half a meter apart. Spirit Sovereign Yan's expression did not change. He was not afraid of Devil Emperor Dugu at all. Devil Emperor Dugu wasn't strong at the moment. Speak. Devil Emperor Dugu stared into his eyes and said faintly. Spirit Sovereign Yen looked excited as he said, I obtained a heavenly law stone by chance, and I can use it to create an invincible army. Heavenly law stone. Devil Emperor Dugu narrowed his eyes and asked, What's the heavenly Tao stone? Is it related to the worldly stone? Spirit Sovereign Yen replied, Both of them have similar effects. One contains the power of heavenly law, while the other contains the power of heaven and earth. They are both world creation wonders. Then he revealed his plan. Devil Emperor Dugu furrowed his brows when he heard this. He stared at Spirit Sovereign Yen and said, You are playing with fire. Spirit Sovereign Yen understood what he meant and said nonchalantly, What's there to be afraid of? Those powerful beings are either dead or unable to descend due to their cultivation. As long as we dominate the northern wilderness region and break away from the heavenly palace's control, we can develop on our own. Who knows, we might even be able to nurture the northern wilderness region into a large world. At that time, you and I will be the lord of the Kiliacosm. The more he spoke, the more excited he became. Even his body began to tremble. Devil Emperor Dugu's brows were still furrowed. Spirit Sovereign Yan's tone changed as he said, I also want to find my son. He was once Grandmaster Aoshi's disciple and was banished to the mortal world by the heavenly palace. If you can help me find him, I can let him take you as his master. He was trying to rope in Devil Emperor Dugu. Devil Emperor Dugu was surprised. Oh, Grandmaster Aoshi? Speaking of Ji Xian, Spirit Sovereign Yen revealed a proud expression. He began to talk about Ji Xian's life. Sun Tomb. Zhou Xuanji and the others stood before Fate Emperor River and started to think about how to deal with it. Founding Emperor Qi Wei's entire body was covered in bandages. Even though he was a second tribulation loose immortal, he couldn't regrow his limbs because he didn't cultivate such a magical technique. He was not like Daoya Old Man who was weak in combat, but had mastered many life-saving abilities and spells. Let's just bury it here. If we bring Fate Emperor River to Skyfall, it will attract a lot of trouble in the future. Moreover, Fate Emperor River will not disappear unless the northern wilderness no longer exists. Fate Emperor River could allow one to become a great emperor. It sounded very powerful, but for the vast majority of people, it was useless. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, Since it's like this, let's fill this place up and let Fate Emperor River return underground. He no longer needed Fate Emperor River. He already had the heavenly Tao mark in the depths of his soul. As long as he defeated 10 quasi-emperors, he would be able to become a martial emperor. The others had no objections. For them, becoming a great emperor was an extremely distant goal, almost untouchable. The group flew out of the crater and began to use various spells to fill the crater. Xiao Jinghong flew to Zhou Xuanji's side and said softly, Revered teacher, Jiang Wudi is severely injured and on the verge of death. Should we save him? Not only him, Songhai Ziggurat Lord Li Yinyu, Mountain Abyss Ziggurat Lord Zheng Junlu, and the other sanctum leaders are still alive. Zhou Xuanji replied calmly, Of course we must save them. Now he no longer saw the 8 sanctums and 7 empires as his opponents. The existence of these factions was to ensure the power of the human race, so they must stay. Xiao Jinghong immediately left and passed down the order. At the same time, news of the battle at Sun Tomb spread. Tens of millions of people were killed or injured. The 8 sanctums and 7 empires were all severely injured. The prowess of an 8th tribulation scattered immortal shocked everyone. When the world heard that Zhou Xuanji dashed out from Fate Emperor River, saved Xian Xianghua, and killed an 8th tribulation scattered immortal, their blood boiled. This matter was like a hero's story in an opera, full of twists and turns. Zhou Xuanji consolidated his position as the world's top overlord. At the same time, the world's hatred for Xian Xianghua decreased. At least Xian Xianghua was fighting for the northern wilderness region. A few days later, the world began to point their fingers at Yang Di. Why didn't the world's top cultivator, the current Emperor Han Yuan, participate in the battle? Soon the world was filled with rumors. The Sword Emperor proved himself again. Those who went to Sun Tomb to stop the Sword Emperor from becoming a great emperor deserve to die. Zhou Xuanji is too powerful. He's going to surpass the predecessors. So the way of the sword can be so powerful. When will Spirit Sovereign Yan die? Yang Di is not worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as Zhou Xuanji. Half a month later, Zhou Xuanji flew to Skyfall with hundreds of thousands of Emperor Sword Court disciples. He sent founding Emperor Qi Wei back first. As for the other factions, he could not care so much. It was already good enough for him to treat their injuries. It would be too troublesome to send them back one by one. Hundreds of thousands of disciples traveled across mountains and rivers while practicing their sword techniques. The scene was extremely majestic. After being stimulated by Zhou Xuanji, the disciples began to practice their sword techniques even without his orders. They wanted to be as powerful as their grand teacher, who could kill powerful cultivators from the upper realm with his sword. This day, Zhou Xuanji was teaching his daughter when he heard Dao Seeker's voice. "Meet me for an important matter." Zhou Xuanji heard her and gave his daughter a few reminders before disappearing. The others were not surprised and continued their journey. 100 miles away, Zhou Xuanji and Dao Seeker stood on a cliff. Below them were connected mountains that were shrouded in mist. It was hazy and beautiful like a paradise. "This is bad." Spirit Sovereign Yin revived Devil Emperor Dugu, Dao Seeker said with a deep voice. Dao Seeker said in a low voice. He felt a sense of pressure at the mention of Devil Emperor Dugu. He had lived for countless years but had never witnessed Lu Wuji's prowess. But he had witnessed Devil Emperor Dugu's invincible figure, which was unforgettable. Zhou Xuanji did not panic. He knew about Devil Emperor Dugu a long time ago. Without Devil Emperor Dugu's help, he could not have obtained the Tianxia map. He still had a good impression of Devil Emperor Dugu. Of course, if Devil Emperor Dugu wanted to be his enemy, he would not show mercy. Moreover, Devil Emperor Dugu's rebirth was a great help to him. This guy was not a great emperor candidate. He was a true great emperor. Other than that, Spirit Sovereign Yin obtained a Heavenly Law stone. He's going to use the power of Heavenly Law to create Heavenly Law puppets for all the powerhouses in the Northern Wilderness region. This will be the most terrifying crisis in history. There is no chance of winning. Dao Seeker continued. His countenance turned increasingly grim, and there was even fear in his eyes. Every generation of the Northern Wilderness region's almighty. It wasn't just the human clan's almighty beings, there were also almighty beings from other races. If Lu Wuji, Emperor Xia, Devil Emperor Dugu, Great Emperor Heartless, and the 9 emperors of the Way of the Sword joined forces, who could stop them? Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown, "What's a Heavenly Law puppet?" Dao Seeker explained that every generation of almighties in the Northern Wilderness region had worked hard to become a great emperor, so they had been branded with the Heavenly Law imprint. The Heavenly Law puppets created by Spirit Sovereign Yin were like clones, and they all had the cultivation and strength of their original bodies when they left the Northern Wilderness region. After Zhou Xuanji understood, he had a strange look on his face. He was just fretting about not having a quasi-emperor to defeat. However, there were too many quasi-emperors and great emperors. Come. Wonderful Bookstore. Chapter 385. How many Heavenly Law puppets are there exactly? Zhou Xuanji asked in a low voice. He cursed in his heart. Just as the first wave subsided, another wave came. Can you let me rest for a while? I'm only 74 years old. How could he endure so much pressure? Dao Seeker sighed and said, I can't think about it. I advise you to hide overseas and ascend as soon as possible. Spread this news to the upper realm. Spirit Sovereign Yan's actions will definitely incur the wrath of the Northern Wilderness region's past powerhouses. When the time comes, they won't just stand by and watch. Zhou Xuanji frowned deeply. If it were him, he would be displeased to find out that someone had created his own Heavenly Law puppet. But he was still far from ascending. Moreover, after he ascended, he would be killed by the Heavenly Palace before he could even meet those powerful beings. After the Northern Wilderness region's experts ascended, the Heavenly Palace was the first to receive them. If the Northern Wilderness region was a dynasty, the Heavenly Palace would be the dynasty that controlled it. Spirit Sovereign Yin is currently at Juedi Cliff. It's best if you take a detour on your way back. I'll be heading overseas to fight for a chance of survival for the human race. Dao Seeker said solemnly with a gloomy expression. Remember, don't go looking for Spirit Sovereign Yin. You are indeed very strong, but he has many unparalleled experts under him. Don't go looking for your death." After saying that, Dao Seeker left in a hurry. Zhou Xuanji pondered on the spot and began to recall historical records. The Xia Emperor, who had led the human race to become the hegemon of the universe. The strongest of the human race, Lu Wuji. He was a noble who could shake mountains and rivers and almost exterminate the demon race. The unparalleled demon emperor of the demon race, the great Emperor Wu Wang, who had once enslaved the human race. Wait a minute. There were too many legendary existences that gave him a headache just thinking about it. He shook his head and returned to Emperor Sword Court's group. He gathered all his trusted aides and walked at the very front. He softly told them about this matter. "What? Really?" Northern Sword Valiant widened his eyes and exclaimed. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. In the next second, he hurriedly covered his mouth, afraid that the disciples would hear. Daoya Old Man's face was ashen and he muttered, "It's over, it's all over." The others were also frightened. Zhou Xuanji was powerful indeed, but to those heavenly law puppets he was just a junior. People were always in awe of their ancestors, especially those who were legendary. Furthermore, they were not facing just one ancestor but all of them. Even someone as proud as Xian Xianghua fell silent. "Should we tell the world about this and gather the power of the world?" Huang Lianxin asked hesitantly. Such a calamity should not be shouldered by Emperor Sword Court alone, much less by Zhou Xuanji. There was no chance of winning this round. Jiang Shui shook her head and said, "Currently both humans and demons have suffered great losses. Not to mention Spirit Sovereign Yen and his heavenly law puppet army, even that 8th tribulation scattered immortal heavenly guard is enough to overturn the world." It was no exaggeration to say that Zhou Xuanji was already the most outstanding person in the world. If not for him, the northern wilderness region's human race might have already perished. Zhou Xiaoxian grabbed Zhou Xuanji's arm tightly and said, "Father, don't be reckless." She was no longer a child and understood the seriousness of the matter. Zhou Xuanji shook his head and did not say anything. He would not retreat from this battle. It was not only for the sake of achieving the martial monarch realm, but also for the sake of protecting the people around him. The more time passed, the more heavenly law puppets there would be. "Why don't I ascend now and pass on this matter?" Xian Xianghua muttered. In the past, she did not bother to ask for reinforcements, but the situation was different now. The enemy was unprecedentedly powerful. Just like what Dao Seeker said, other than this method they would surely lose. "No, the Heavenly Hall wants to kill you too. Aren't you courting death?" Zhou Xuanji rejected decisively before looking at everyone. He said meaningfully, "Everyone, the northern wilderness region is facing more and more calamities. There is not much time left for you. Cultivate well. You all return to Skyfall and focus on your cultivation. I will go to Juadi Cliff alone. If I cannot defeat them, I will retreat. With my current power, no one can stop me if I want to escape." Maybe Spirit Sovereign Yen has not created too many heavenly law puppets. We still have a chance. Everyone heard him and fell silent. They wanted to stop him, but they were in no position to do so. Zhou Xiaoxian was anxious and wanted to speak, but Zhou Xuanji covered her mouth. He looked at Jiang Shui and said with a smile, "Take good care of this girl. Don't run out again. I don't want to be surrounded by enemies and have to think of a way to save her." Zhou Xiaoxian stopped struggling. Even her ears were blushing. Jiang Shui nodded and said with a smile, "I believe you." She did not just believe that he could come back alive. Zhou Xuanji immediately turned into a stream of sword light and left. Lin Changa clenched his fists and cursed, "It's all my fault. I'm too weak. Master has to fight alone every time." Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Tsongjian, Ning Zifeng, Han Shenbua, Chongming Demon Monarch, and the others looked terrible too. The little black snake lay on Ah Big's head and sighed, "Seems like I need to work hard too." Daoya Old Man sighed and did not speak further. He looked toward the direction where Zhou Xuanji left, and his eyes became determined. At Juadi Cliff. Chapter 387. No. The humans of the northern wilderness region must be annihilated. Spirit Sovereign Yen replied forcefully. He could take Zhou Xuanji in, but he could not allow Zhou Xuanji to make any requests. If Zhou Xuanji was unwilling, then he could kill Zhou Xuanji with a justifiable reason. Devil Emperor Dugu shook his head and said, "No race is always the main character of the world. In other mortal realms, the demons might be in charge and the demons might be in charge. Why be so stubborn? You will ascend sooner or later to pursue a higher great Tao." He watched Zhou Xuanji's rise. In his heart, Zhou Xuanji was like his junior or disciple. He really did not want this brat to die here. Zhou Xuanji took out the sun-devouring Tiango sword and true Lord Xianxing sword and said, "If so, then let's fight. I also want to see how powerful the previous powerful cultivators are." Devil Emperor Dugu shook his head and did not speak anymore. He closed his eyes and continued his cultivation. Spirit Sovereign Yen burst out in laughter. His laughter was filled with disdain. This brat is so arrogant. But he could understand. A genius who had never tasted defeat always thought that he was the most powerful and looked down on his seniors. The 17 heavenly law puppets leaped up and charged toward Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji focused his eyes and charged at them with his dual sword wills. His body was like a sharp sword, flashing with a cold light. In the blink of an eye, he was fighting with the 17 heavenly law puppets. He danced with both swords at extreme speed. But even so, he was at a disadvantage. Wang Ho did not have any enchanted artifacts but only his fists and legs. His attacks were powerful and domineering. Zhou Xuanji could hardly block each of his punches and kicks. Lu Wuji used his palms as weapons. Bolts of lightning coiled around him and tore apart the sword chi with great power. The other 15 heavenly law puppets were not weak either. Each had their own abilities. Some wielded swords, some wielded sabers, some wielded spears like dragons, and some swung their horsetail whisks with boundless magic energy. Their attacks were extremely ferocious. No matter how exquisite Zhou Xuanji's sword techniques were, he could not block them. Seeing this, Spirit Sovereign Yen laughed even more savagely. Bai Hao Yisun sighed. "It's over. No one can save this emperor." At this moment, Zhou Xuanji activated the divine energy of the sun-devouring Tiango sword and slashed with all his might. Marquis Lu Wuji and the other heavenly law puppets quickly dodged, but one heavenly law puppet was too slow and turned into ashes right away. Spirit Sovereign Yen stopped laughing and started to watch the battle seriously. Bai Hao Yisun's eyes lit up, and anticipation filled his heart. With the sword soul, Zhou Xuanji regained the upper hand. He didn't borrow the power of heaven and earth. He wanted to see how strong he was. The celestial shaking sword was very strong. With the sun-devouring Tiango sword, no one among the great tribulation scattered immortals was a match for him one-on-one. Now that he had obtained the celestial shaking sword, how could he not be happy? In these 3 years he had obtained a total of 5 amethyst divine swords. That's right, they were all amethyst rank. They were the screaming sword, the perseverance sword, the dragon perishing sword, the clamoring sword, and the flying swan sword. Information about the new godly sword appeared before his eyes. Sword name, dream-devouring true martial demon sweeping level. Shocking immortal description. The true martial divine force can devour dreams and exterminate demons. Demons howl as soon as this sword is used. Be careful when using it. The description was not detailed enough, but it seemed to be very impressive. Zhou Xuanji could not help but think about even higher grade legendary swords. Ordinary or iron, bronze, silver, gold, amethyst, glorious gold, heavenly soul, intimidating spirit, celestial shaking, god-slaying, Armageddon. Could the god-slaying sword really slay gods? The Armageddon divine sword could destroy a world with one strike? He was looking forward to it. At that moment, the gigantic eyes in the night sky suddenly opened wide. A halo of light descended from the sky and landed on Zhou Xuanji's body. Boom. The area within a radius of 300 meters was flattened. Shengguan Jisoo and some commoners were knocked unconscious. This is fate? Zhou Xuanji was shocked in his heart. He could sense that his fate had doubled. However, this was only the beginning. Numerous halos of light descended and fused into his body. There were 9 halos in total, which made his fate reach its peak. The entire human race's fate added together could not compare to his. The main thing was that the human race was about to die. Faintly he understood the true meaning of this. Heavenly Law great emperors were divided into 9 grades. 9th grade was the weakest, while 1st grade was the most powerful. Great emperors had the emperor's might that could suppress mortals. The higher the grade, the more powerful the emperor's might. A 1st grade great emperor could suppress an 8th grade great emperor. Emperor's might was the signature divine ability of a great emperor. Those heavenly law puppets were not their true bodies and did not have the emperor's might. Otherwise, Zhou Xuanji could not have killed so many great emperor candidates. The powerful radiance dissipated, and Zhou Xuanji revealed himself. His mask had already turned into ashes. His eyes glowed with a purple light, which looked devilish and oppressive. The purple Tai Chi diagram on his forehead changed. 9 tiny patterns appeared at the edge of the Tai Chi diagram. They were like 9 tiny swords with their tips pointing outwards. He levitated in the air, and his body gave off a faint silver radiance. I want to follow you and assist you. What do you think? Zhou Xuanji said with interest. Oh? What do you want and how can you help me? Weren't you very arrogant before? When I fought Huangquan Drake King you said that I would definitely die. What about now? He was secretly pleased but he didn't show it. After becoming a great emperor, he no longer cared about the man in the woven rush raincoat. It was not an exaggeration to say that he did not care about anyone in the entire northern wilderness region. Only his wife was an exception. I just want the human race to prosper and maintain its position as the main character of the world. I can do whatever you want me to do, but as a tribulation executive, I can't attack the people of the world. I can't even have physical contact with them. The man in the raincoat said honestly. He was still very confident. Compared to Dao Seeker, he knew more about the northern wilderness region. Zhou Xuanji fell into deep thought and did not give an answer immediately. The man in the woven rush raincoat took a deep breath and said, I can reveal a shocking piece of news to you now. A person from the upper world who doesn't belong to the heavenly palace has already infiltrated the northern wilderness region. Her strength is at 9 tribulation scattered immortal, the peak of the mortal world. Zhou Xuanji frowned and asked, Who is she? The man in the raincoat did not hide anything. This person from the upper realm was called Xiao Hongjun. She was an evil woman with a lot of sins. Even the heavenly hall could not do anything to her. The man in the woven rush raincoat did not know the reason why she descended into the mortal world. However, according to him, Xiao Hongjun was a greater threat than the heavenly hall. It was said that no matter where this devil went, he would bring misery and suffering. His father was a leading figure in the upper realm's devil path and was as powerful as an immortal. Alright, you can follow me from now on. I want you to investigate the whereabouts of the descendant of the demonic emperor bloodline. As for Xiao Hongjun, he did not want to care about her for now. At least for now, Xiao Hongjun did not act recklessly. He didn't want to create enmity for no reason. The hatred between the heavenly palace and the ancestors of the human race was already deep enough. Alright. The man in the raincoat was straightforward and left immediately. After he disappeared, Zhou Xuanji remembered something. I forgot to get this guy to show his true colors. He's always acting mysterious and acting like a villain. Zhou Xuanji shook his head and laughed. After that, he flew toward Skyfall. At the same time, the human sanctums and empires began to take action. Previously, because of Spirit Sovereign Yen, they could only hide. But now, they had to regain control of their territories. The restless demons all returned home in fear and did not dare to harass the humans.